The floor is yours. Where's the handheld?
Microphone. Anyone has a microphone going around the room? Thank you very much. So as Chairman West said, my name is Tyler Krause. I'm the chairman of the Webb County Republican Party. We're very happy to host you guys here today in Webb County. It's something historic. We've never had the SREC come to Webb County or Laredo. So it's really great that we have the attention of all of you all. So thank you. I want to show you guys a report that one of our precinct chairs put together. His name is Jose Salazar, and he put together a really good report on something that's going on and all around Texas. And that is the privatization of our elections. For example, here in Webb County, the privatization of Webb County elections by Centers for Tech and Civic Life. You can see the logo on there has the face of Facebook CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg, and there's a reason for that, because he was behind funding these organizations, this organization, Center for Tech and Civic Life. So if we could move to the next slide. So it was on Thursday, January 28, 2021, when myself and two of my precinct chairs met with the Webb County Elections Officer, Jose Salvador Tellez, to discuss election procedures and safeguards. Can you move to the next slide, please? Oh, thank you. We learned that the purchase of 140 new voting machines was funded through a $2.8 million grant from the Centers for Tech and Civic Life. Voting plan on October 1st, 2020 to CTCL. CTCL accepted the plan and awarded the grant on October 7th, 2020. The Webb County Commissioners Court, if awarded approval, is scheduled for Tuesday, October 13, 2020. That's what they said. Because the approval of the grant occurred a couple of weeks before the 2020 general election, we will not see the full impact of the CTCL grant until the 2022 general election. And here you can see some articles about this specific CTCL grant place. For example, by Vox, which is a really liberal news outlet. America scrambles to take part in Mark Zuckerberg's $250 million gold rush. So these people are funding our elections, and there's something we need to do. We need to do something about it. So what's in Webb County Safe Voting Plan? There are some good things like funding. Obviously, the PPEs and sanitizing is not something that's going to be relevant anymore for 2022. The Webb County Safety Voting Plan appears benign on the surface, but there are also things that concern us. What is in it? To process and tabulate, Webb is requesting additional personnel to tabulate absentee by mail ballots. They want an increase from 5 workers to 25 workers at a cost of $261,960. Outreach materials and TV and radio spots to promote absentee by mail and early voting for a cost of $3,000. And according to Pew Research Center, September 8, 2020, 60% of Trump voters prefer to vote in person on election day, while 58% of Biden voters chose to vote by mail. The initiative clearly caters to Democrats, and that's kind of the core of this whole CTCL grant. A lot of the money, most of it was sent to Democratic counties throughout the country. 4 laptops with specific ballot verification were purchased. They also purchased 85 precinct scanners and high-speed scanners and an estimated cost of $1,738,000. So it's a lot of money. The total devices the voter selects on screen and the device turns to take a ballot, placing one more step between the voter and the ballot. So obviously, as Republicans, we try to have as few steps between the voter and the ballot as we can, because we know that there's nefarious things that go on. 20 staff personnel to be poll recruiters. Will poll workers be recruited from Democrat circles? Good question. Should there be an equal number from both parties or reflect the voting demographics from each party? Absolutely. In addition to those usually hired. And we say those workers need to be trained. Who will train them? How will they be trained? Using what materials? I've been trying to reach out to our Webb County Elections Administrator. I've tried to reach out to him on several occasions because he said he was going to have a training in March sometime, but he has yet to hold that training, and they have yet to give me any specifics. Early voting and ballot drop-off option, 10 full voting sites and an increase in mobile sites from 5 to 10 with PPEs and hazard pay at a cost of $25,000. Both denial of access and difficult logistics limited Republican poll watchers in 2020 nationwide, as we all know. That was a big topic. Webb Republicans will have increased difficulty with more early voting sites in 2022. This plays into the Democrats. For in-person voting, Webb is committed to securing 250 in-person polling locations on election day. From 66 current will be severely hampered into a predominantly Democrat county. So obviously the more voting sites, polling sites they have, the harder it is for them. Secure one drop box at a cost of $35,000. Due to lower positive rates and increased vaccinations, we will not need a drop box. A drop box is just an additional thing that can go wrong for Republicans and right for Democrats. So obviously they're trying to put more things into the process, right? Because that's where they find ways to cheat. Webb County concludes with its commitment to be intentional and strategic in reaching our historically disenfranchised residents and communities. This is what they're quoting in there. And above all, ensure the right to vote in a diversity of communities throughout the country. Democrats often use disenfranchised and diversity to refer to the groups which comprise their base. Will these funds be used to disproportionately help Democrat voters? There are a lot of people that they refer to as disenfranchised that align with us here in Webb County specifically. JR authored a report on December 14, 2020, which focused on CTCL entitled The Legitimacy and Effect of Private Funding in Federal and State Electoral Processes. I encourage everybody to read this. If you go on Google and you put that in, you will see the report, and it focuses on a lot of the battleground states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and so on. But Texas is also included in it. Funded by hundreds of millions of dollars from the Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg and other high-tech interest activist organizations created a two-tiered election system that treated voters differently depending on whether they lived in Democrat or Republican strongholds. This privatization of elections available equally to all voters. So they're trying to privatize our elections. We don't want to do that because, yes, sir.
Have you researched is it lawful to accept private funding to purchase government election machines?
Well, it is in violation of the Help America Vote Act. So, it should be unlawful. I don't know all the laws personally, but it definitely should be. I don't think we should allow elections to be privatized because then these ultra-rich liberals are just going to run our elections, such as Mark Zuckerberg, Mike Bloomberg. I mean, they're just going to run our elections and we'll never have a chance to win again. I'm sorry.
If I'm correct, that's one of the things that's included in the election integrity legislation in the state of Texas, because of what Mark Zuckerberg
CTCL funds allowed these Democrat strongholds to spend roughly $47 per voter compared to $4 to $7 per voter in traditionally Republican areas of the state. So obviously they're outspending us on an astronomical scale. Rendering CTCL funding unnecessary. That's one thing, is that they sought this money but they didn't really need it. There were surpluses in state funding they could have gone for in these states, but they decided to go for funding through CTCL. Shows the surpluses that they had. They had a lot of money that they could have gone for, but they didn't, through the CARES, through their And here it shows, again, for example, the available funds, 49% in Michigan, 92% in Minnesota, 79% in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin 60%. The voter registration databases of both Michigan and Pennsylvania failed to comply with the Help America Vote Act standards required by the National Institute of Standards for Certified Technological Security. Some states are entering into partnerships with Rock the Vote and Turbo Vote, left-wing organizations, and providing them access to their voter registration systems. How am I doing on time? Okay. What is in the CTCO grant? Can Webb County simply opt out of the conditions have not been met, or B, CTCL is required to do so to comply with applicable laws or regulations. So that's what they call clawbacks. So they include these clawback clauses in there that basically force them to spend the money they want, the way they want to. And so it caters to the Democrats, the way that the money's spent. And if they don't spend it that way, then they can take away the money. They reserve the right. And should Texans be concerned? Absolutely, we should be concerned. As you see right here, Texas got $216,000 in grants, which was 7 grants, which was the second highest number of grants in the entire nation, except for Michigan, which got 8 grants that totaled $6,106,000. Pennsylvania got 5, which totaled $13,279,000. Definitely something to be concerned about. Can fund or control swing states. In Texas, it will be impossible for them to lead state and federal elections. Am I right? The goal of CTCL is very clear. The 7,000 strong Laredo Trump train, the increase in Republican participation, and the Democrat loss of Zapata County put a target on our back, and we are asking for help. So, we're asking for help specifically from the election integrity committee. I know, John Barnes, wherever you're at. Okay. We're asking for your help. Please, we need to look into this. And thank you very much for listening to this.
Why Democrats, what are they doing in favor of Democrats that where an ordinary person can say, yeah, that's messed up?
Well, what they're doing specifically is they're allowing more early election day sites, right? That's one of the things that they're doing. The drop-off locations, they're Democrats, they're doing that. So those are a couple of examples of what they're doing in favor of Democrats. And, you know, it's something that doesn't cater to us Republicans, and also the mail-in voting is another big deal. The mail-in voting doesn't really benefit Republicans because most Republicans vote in person, so we know that for sure. And the fact that all those things happen is catering to Democrats.
Could you show that they are getting
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, definitely that report that I quoted, it does point out specifically in there that the Democrat states were getting funding through that, and they were targeting it specifically to Democrat states versus Republican states, and it outlined that was their intention to do that. Yes, sir.
Is there any more new business? Chair recognizes Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chairman, I move to suspend the rules to consider a resolution supporting Susan Rafferty's properties.
Is there a second?
Second.
Resolution to support Susan Wright in Congressional District 6.
any other Republicans in that race?
Yes, there are. There's a total of 23 candidates, 12 Republicans and 11 Democrats.
Thank you, sir.
The parliamentarian has ruled that there is a way that this body can produce a resolution of support.
So the immediately pending question, of course, is a motion to suspend the rules.
Order.
Suspend the rules. The bylaws have two different provisions that deal with this subject matter. The first is under Article 9, Section 3. As I understand, I'm getting a point of order before we even know what the motion is, but I think everybody knows what the motion is. Article 9, Section 3 funds says funds shall be allocated, blah, blah, blah. This shall not preclude the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas or his designees from soliciting support and involvement of elected officials and candidates raising assistance for the benefit of the RPT, nor will it prohibit commendations for meritorious service, nor the party publishing or promoting a resolution that is under our standing rules. 3, use of RPT staff and resources. This is this language. The staff and resources of the RPT may be made available to support the campaign efforts of Republican nominees in any way that is not in conflict with the RPT rules or the SREC bylaws. These resources may be made available in the same way to support the campaigns of Republican candidates in non-contested primaries and identifiable Republican candidates in nonpartisan races were authorized by resolution of the SREC. So the bylaw provisions specifically as written uses the word primaries. So the election to fill a vacancy of a congressman is not a primary, it's an open race. It's kind of like a general election. And as written, that's the rule of the party.
The motion on the floor is to suspend the rules.
I have a parliamentary question, I guess. This seems to be saying that the resource be given to a person in a non-primary period. It doesn't seem to say that it can be given out otherwise. I'm just reading the last sentence.
Well, I think the point that the parliamentarian is bringing up is that this is what you would call a jungle primary. It's an open race. It's not just a strictly Republican primary. And that's why the parliamentarian has allowed the motion to come up to suspend the rules to consider the resolution of support. Yes, it's a two-thirds vote to suspend the rules. We will need to use the clickers so that we can track. This is a vote to suspend the rules to consider the resolution. The voting open. Voting open.
I'm sorry, ma'am, excuse me.
If you are voting in favor of suspending the rules to consider the resolution to support Susan Wright in SD6 race, CD6. That says, I'm sorry. 4, 3, 2, 1. Vote is closed. There are 43 yeas, 9 nays, and 8 abstain on the motion to suspend 6 election. So it passes. Travis, you're recognized.
Thank you, members, for allowing us to have the debate. Can we get the resolution language up? Poor Brandon's still back there trying to eat his lunch and making it work. Come on, Brandon. We won't ask for push-ups. There we go. Members, the resolution reads, whereas greater than 90%, verified that was Steve Atwell who's collecting signatures, 90% of the individual state Republican executive committee members have already endorsed or supported for Congress. Now, therefore be it resolved, the state Republican executive committee formally endorses and supports Susan Wright for the vacancy in Texas Congressional District 6 in a special election, and be it further resolved, the Republican Party of Texas should expend reasonable resources to support the candidacy of Susan Wright. Members, this race is nothing to be pointed to an absolute. There's a ton of candidates in it. The Democrats have had a top ballot draw. They're sitting, Lisa, what are they, 7-3?
The top 2 Democrats are 3 and 4 on the ballot. Susan,
3 and 4. Susan is 7 or 8. If we don't act and support a candidate, we could very well lose this seat. We could see Democrats in the runoff for this seat. Back when Senator Cruz ran, and I'll tell you just the effort that the Democrats put into Texas, when Senator Cruz ran, he lost his home county by 100,000 votes. He won by 180,000 vote margin. We generated 23,000 in West Texas, but we had to work very, very hard. He didn't have the resources to spend to put in our county. This attack is not going to stop. So I'm willing to ask you to make an exception. I know we don't like to pick Republican winners and losers, but I think I'm asking primary, and it is a dumpster fire. We've got to make an exception and protect this seat and put our support behind Susan Wright. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Covey, you're recognized.
Covey, SD3, and I have personally endorsed Susan Wright and really am behind her. However, if we create this precedent, then we are opening ourselves up to other situations, other emergency situations. I understand that we're in a critical point in our country, but we're also a party of rules, and this is the way and the precedent, the example that we're setting not only on the state level, but at every county around the state. And so this just causes a lot of problems. It presents, I think, a worse problem than it solves. So for those reasons, I would ask you please to not support this. Thank you.
Mr.
Jones.
Chair, Grace Jones, SD20. I would like to ask your permission to yield my time or for former SREC SD21 to speak and address the body.
Permission is granted. Ms. Lacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And body, thank you very much for this. Folks, I understand our concerns. We support all of our Republicans. However, this is a jungle election. It is not a primary. A primary is when all Republicans are running together, or all Democrats, or whatever. We have 11 Republicans, 10 Democrats, a Libertarian, and an Independent. This is where we are failing. This happens in Louisiana all the time because they have jungle elections. They want to call them primaries, but they're actually not primaries, they're elections. And they get behind one person and support that person, and that's what they seat. In this instance, and I know what was just raised here, that are we setting precedent for further elections? We have very few jungle elections that are, yes, that are primary. Let's go ahead and let our primaries, go ahead and continue forth the way we've been doing. But in the occasion that we have a jungle election when everyone is running together, it is a time that we need to come together and support just one person. We cannot lose this seat. You know how critically valuable it is that we hold this congressional seat. So I ask you to also go ahead and at this point in time, come together and support Susan Wright for this position.
Mr. Cheevan, you recognize?
Sean Cheevan, SD 17. Tough to follow and disagree with Ronald Lacey, unfortunately. But, I would urge y'all to vote against. I agree with the comments before that this sets I would say, dangerous precedent. We've seen this play out in the past. Races, and it seems well-intentioned at the time, and it breeds bad blood and animosity. And as Ms. Green said so eloquently before, Mr. Chairman, you'll not always be our chairman, so we don't know what kind of uses this precedent we would put to in the future. I think there have to be other ways. I mean, it was raised before, 90% of the SREC has personally endorsed. I was one of those 90%. I think that's a more appropriate way to do this and still get the point across and still help to clear and settle the field somewhat without setting the precedent of the official rubber stamp of the institution of the SREC that this was said. So I'd urge all to vote against. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I move to amend for the period and after Susan Wright. I'd like to add a comma, space. Should she proceed to a runoff election? Motion here. I'll speak to it a little bit. And of course, everybody knows.
Yeah, we need a second.
Oh, sorry.
It has been moved and has been seconded. The amended language, should she proceed to a runoff election against a Democrat. You may speak on your motion.
I think it's really bad voodoo to support. We have other good Republicans that are not inconsequentially resourced that are running in this election. For us to take a position against that individual or those individuals in favor of one, even if we really like the one, I think to me it's just, it says something we shouldn't say. It goes back to the smoke-filled decisions used to be made, and we don't do that anymore. So even though I am a fervent supporter of Susan Wright, as other people have said, I think that 90% of the SREC personally endorsing is a much bigger deal. Yeah, I'm sure she could use some money, but that's putting the imprimatur of the RPT behind it at this moment. It seems to me to not be the right answer. We shouldn't be doing the right thing or the wrong thing just because we want a particular outcome that we think will be right.
Is there any further comments, debate on the amended? There is a motion, and it has been seconded, to amend the resolution to include the words, after Susan Wright, comma, should she proceed to a runoff election against a Democrat. All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? It appears that the nays have it. That motion is not carried forward. Yes, Mr. Wiley.
David Whiting, 12. I come before you to just simply ask you not what's right or wrong or what the party should be doing, but my friend, Susan Wright, a member of this body for a number of years, and really a great candidate. We need to support our own. And if we can't support Susan Wright, then I don't think this body can do anything. And Susan's a good friend of mine. I'm just asking this on my personal side. Jake Yelsey, another Republican, an elected House member, is a candidate in the race. If he's a friend of yours, I understand you don't want to support
Mr. Precure.
Carol Wicker, SD 31. Personally involved with this situation being in the Panhandle area, so I understand that there are some some of you that have some personal ties to Susan. And before, and I just want you to know that I did endorse Susan, 100% endorse her based upon what I know of my research about Ron. Ron was one of the most constitutional supporting representatives that we had in Congress. When I looked at his record, by far, when it came to constitutional issues, he voted in favor of the Constitution as intended by our founders more than any other representative that we have in Congress right now. But I do not think that it is good for us as a body. I don't know, I'm going to claim ignorance on some of those representatives that are some of them vying for this position. But again, I do believe as a body, for us to pick and choose just one whenever we're not really representing those voters in that district on a personal level.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Atwell.
Just for clarifications, I've been working on this list for a month, and I was kind of surprised that this proposal came up. It was a little bit of a surprise that this proposal came up, and I had to think it through whether it was a good idea or not. I do believe it is a good idea, and I'm a big stickler of the party not getting involved in the primaries. From the bottom, and has no business being in the state, as far as I'm concerned. But the polls indicate it is in the lead by around 21, 23%, somewhere in there. The next two highest are Democrats. There is a chance that we lose the seat because if they get in a runoff against each other. The other Republicans in the race are stuck at the highest percentage was 8%. Then it goes on to farther down, not even registered. And that's even after some TV ads was run. So, you know, they're not getting any traction. It's the Democrats who are gaining on Susan. And it's within our rules. And I would hate the fact that we become sticklers on this and we lose a seat. Just because we can't get by this. And I understand maybe we need to have another committee on the rules to kind of look at this and tighten it up later. Right now, we're in a fight. Big, hairy fight. And if it was somebody else ahead of everybody, and there was no chance of any of the other Republicans closing that margin to where they could be in the runoff, I would say, you know, we got to stay out of it. That's not the case. We've got to, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald.
Chris McDonald, SD6, I'm supportive of this amendment. At first heard it, I was like, nah, we shouldn't be involved, but we've been confirmed that it is within scope and authority of this body to consider. It is not a primary, it is a wide open election. Secondly, we can't win. Every position we have and resources, and those resources don't necessarily have to be money. That could be our field staff. We'll be putting boots on the ground as opposed to necessarily money in the bank, because that's what's going to win, is boots on the ground. Further, I started off thinking on the other side of this issue, concerned as you were about the president. On the whole deal with auxiliaries and committees. Both him and the good work by their leader, Stephen Broden, has taken another direction for that committee. And I was ready to kill it. And realized that it was about to get gone. And people are now working, and I see great possibilities for that as well. So going back to Mr. George's point here, again, we need to stand up and have some cojones each time and make a decision when it comes before this body, be it and make a yay or a nay. And in this case, this isn't a precedent, because we will consider if this ever again, we will have some cojones hopefully, and make a decision. So I encourage you to take up arms, help out Ms. Wright, and vote in favor of helping her get into Congress and defending this seat. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support this, and it's not because of Susan Wright. I don't know. Maybe a sweet lady, she maybe is a snake. I don't know. The reason that I'm supporting this is strategic, Mr. Chairman. I know you struggle with strategy and public speaking, but Susan Wright is currently polling, what, 22-25%. Her nearest Republican opponent, I think, is in single digits. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what's happening is you have down ballot, down poll Republicans who are splitting the vote, who are taking votes away from the Republican that would be winning if this was the general election. If we allow the Democrats to split the Republican in a jungle start, we're going to end up with Democrats in the runoff. And it does. If it were up to me, I would take Susan Wright's name off of this. I would just list the district and say the Republican that is currently leading in the polls. That is the only important thing. I understand we're trying to replace a gentleman who passed away. I get it. I understand. That's emotional. We have to support the Republican that is currently leading, and we as the leadership of the RP need to send a signal to those candidates. Guys, get out. Get behind the leader, who is Susan, regardless of how Republican her Republican is, and let's win this seat. And then later, you've got some cred with Susan and all of her staff, and when you want to run, they're going to remember, this guy, he could have cost us the race, but he jumped on the team and he took us home for the win. We're going to support you later. That's horse trading, Republican style. That's what we need to be doing, is sending the message to the candidates who are down further in the polls. Guys, get out, support the leader. Let's rally for the win.
Mr. Bro, are you making a motion to replace the name Susan Wright with the current leader in the polls?
No, sir, I am not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Leslie Thomas, SB 23. Just something, talk about tradition. The American tradition is that it's traditionally been the husband dies in office, the widow goes to serve. And I think that's a very important tradition, and I think that we need to support that.
Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to close real quick. How many in this room think that that the Democrats stole the election from Donald Trump? Well, he didn't steal the election from Donald Trump. We got beat. They beat us. They beat us by bending the rules. They beat us by messing with a virus. They beat us by using every dirty trick in the book. Democrats don't stop. They sit in their tenured college jobs and they figure out how to beat us, while we sit back and we play by the rules. If we lose this seat, millions of dollars back. I'm willing to look the other way. I'm willing to bend the rules just a bit to protect this seat. It is critical. If you're looking for precedent, I'll show you one that's a little bit parallel that we do in the Republican Party. Has anybody ever participated in a ballot replacement scenario at their county party? Have you had to pick a judge? Have you had to pick a room full of Republicans to be the leader and to be the winner? We already do it. We already have to pick winners. And I agree, this is a scary precedent. I sat with the parliamentarian and we talked about this is a scary precedent to set, what we're doing here. But I think as drastic as this is, the attack, the onslaught by the Democrats on Texas, it's worth it this one time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Garcia, you recognize.
I'm speaking in favor of the resolution. Just a quick anecdote about the dynamics of the so-called jungle primary. In a few years ago, and usually, I mean, it's unlikely for a Republican to win a citywide in Houston. It's very difficult. In that race, we ended up with 2 Republicans in the runoff. combined, they had a minority of the vote. But the way the vote splintered, there were so many Democrats, and they splintered the vote in so many ways that the top two finishers were Republicans. Now, if it had been a Republican versus a Democrat in the runoff, the Republican would have been clobbered, because this is Houston. But because the way of the vote was fractured, the top two finishers, combined with like 40% were Republicans, while the rest of the candidates who combined for 60% were Democrats. So in that way, we actually, stole a seat from the Democrats in that one city council race. But that is going to happen to us, okay? This should be a Republican seat. But the way the vote is going to fracture is if two Democrats get into the runoff, even if they only combine for 40%, then all the other Republicans who combined got 60%, it won't matter, because that seat will then have fallen to the Democrats. So again, this is a jungle election. It's a very unique circumstance. This does not set a precedent for ever endorsing in a primary.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Brooks?
Mr. Chair, question.
There's been a motion to call the question. Is there a second? There's been a motion and a second to call the question to end the debate on this issue. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. It is moved and seconded that the amendment as projected be adopted. Be adopted. All in favor of the proposal, press 1A if you are in favor, press 2B if you are opposed, press 3C if you are abstaining. The vote is open. Vote will close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The vote is now closed. On the resolution for the Republican Party of Texas to support candidate Susan Wright in Congressional District 6, the resolution carries 43 yeas, 9 nays, and 7 abstains. Any further new business from the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I want a clarification on the earlier resolution about the gap. Sorry to bring that back away. But I think the resolution was to delete the account.
It has been deleted.
Suspended. Suspended and deleted is two different things.
Well, I've already told him to delete it.
Okay, well, there's no problem with the deleting the account. Somebody else could get that handle, Texas GOP, and still continue to use it. So it's probably in our best interest to hold that handle until either GAP changes their policy or if we have enough resources.
Okay, we'll call and make sure that happens.
So just suspend it, don't delete it.
We'll call and make sure that happens right now.
The original motion was to suspend that.
Well, we had kind of already suspended. We weren't posted on it anymore regularly, but we will get it back into suspension, so we hold on to the domain. Any other new business? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Knowlton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Marion Knowlton, SD19. I'd like to take personal privilege for a couple minutes to address the body.
Ms. Knowlton has a point of privilege for 2 minutes. That's what a couple is.
I would be remiss if I did not address you all and express my extreme gratitude for your support and race for State Representative for House District 31. Your message went far and wide to House District 31, which is very close to here in Stark County. And Republicans there, and there are Republicans there, we are within striking distance of turning Texas red. I got 42% of the vote, and I challenged a senior incumbent Democrat who had $500,000 against my $50,000 bank. I entered the race because I was asked by a resident of Stark County, by someone in North Texas who said, you have the grit to do it, and by the Republican Party of Texas who said, let's not let any Democrat go unchallenged. So I stepped up. It was a lonely ride, I can tell you that. But there are people down there fighting. Mary Wilson, county chairman in Duval County, where they go and every candidate gets the opportunity to get 60 mail-in ballots and hand them out. Roscoe Herrera in Stark County, and I'm committed to help them. They want help, they need help. What we can help them, election integrity. Their election process is fraught with fraud. And so stay on task with election integrity. It's really important because Donald Trump showed that we can take the valley. And we're very close to that. So I'm committed to the district. We all have to see what redistricting is going to bring. That's very important. We all have to keep our eyes on that prize. And I welcome any support that you can offer to the South Texas. I'm in it for the long haul, as I know you are too. Run again.
We got your back.
Mr. Atwell, you're recognized.
Yes, I have a resolution. I'd like to have the rules suspended to hear it, please. Motion to suspend rules.
Motion to suspend the rules on a resolution to...
What's the new title? Opposition of criminalization of abortion.
There's a motion to suspend the rules to consider a resolution on the
Criminalization of abortion.
Criminalization of abortion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. This requires 2/3. Is there, you would like to further explain your reason to suspend the rules? Okay, it's not debatable, I'm sorry. I owe y'all 10. We will get to that after we adjourn. This will have to be done by your voting pad. Suspend the rules to consider this resolution. 2B is a no. 3C is abstaining. The voting is now open. Voting will close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Voting is now closed. The motion to suspend the rules to consider this resolution passes. 31 yeas, 23 nays. Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. Not good math. It fails because you did not achieve the 2/3.
Thank you for considering Georgia.
Yes. Further new business. Who said Georgia math? I got your push-ups.
You're texting now.
Yes, it's coming. I just got to finish new business. You tell me. You tell me. You tell me.
The article dealing with committees. Paragraph F, Resolutions Committee. It says it shall not be in order for the SREC to consider a policy position resolution which has not been previously considered by the Resolutions Committee or has been considered by the Resolutions Committee and failed. This bylaw may be suspended by either a majority vote of those members present voting or the filing minority report. I advise the chairman it required 2/3.
Teammates. All right. So the motion to suspend the rules, it did pass 31 to 23, 5 abstains. Mr. Abreu, you have the floor to explain your resolution. Are you withdrawing your resolution?
What's that? Yes, Ian's going to read the resolution.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Whereas the State Republican Executive Committee demands the ending of abortion in Texas and across the United States, and whereas through the use of education and ministry, the annual numbers of abortions in Texas has decreased below the number of abortions that were occurring pre-Roe v. Wade, and whereas previous to Roe v. Wade, Texas law punished those who performed abortions through prosecution, though Texas did not generally prosecute women and always included an exception to protect the life of the mother. And whereas in some cases, women seeking abortions have been considered victims by the pro-life movement, and whereas many women are coerced or threatened to get abortions by family members, legislation can be construed to assert that women might be prosecuted for murder, or the persons performing the abortion and father help, and whereas Texas law considers many factors when enforcing individuals guilty for unlawfully taking an innocent life, including the actor's negligence and intent. Are we not scrolling? Sorry, am I going too fast? Where was I? Okay. Whereas Texas law considers many factors when enforcing individuals guilty for unlawfully taking an innocent life, including the actor's negligence and intent, and whether the victim is a member of the judiciary, a firefighter, or a police officer, or younger than 11 years old, among other factors. Be it therefore resolved that Texas Republicans remain steadfast in seeking the end of abortion, doing so by focusing on abortion providers, change in the culture, and extending justice with mercy to women seeking abortion while opposing. It's not.
Mr. Atwell?
Yes, just to give you a explanation of this. This is similar language to what we passed in SB 9 and SB 10, city conventions. Only my version and Ann's version of it was one page. This is the Warrenized version of it. We have, this does not violate our platform. Yes. It picks on to an existing bill that was originally put in play 4 years ago by Tony Tinderholt. It was the abolitionist bill, was an attack on it required women to get the death penalty for having an abortion. This was a decoy bill. It was a decoy bill. Stephanie Click had to dismember the bill that they were going to use. And
Sidebars.
sorry. Okay, Tony's bill, he took the hit for the team. We got to correct the, and while staying another bill, and it got passed. That bill subsequently is going to the Supreme Court, and will continue to save lives. I'm personally pro-life. Debating the hearts and minds on this issue. That's one of the reasons we've started to get a lot of traction on our bills and everything. What we're asking to do is just let them know that we don't support.
Mr. Carr, recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Carr, SD 22. I am the chairman of the Abolish Abortion Subcommittee of the Legislature. Who does have provision for the provider of the abortion. So that's the target. I'm totally unaware of any bill that says we're going to go after the women. We don't want women having them. Now, there are some provisions in the Paxton and other bills that say that if there is a... Pardon? Okay, I was going to say what I'm getting at is in the Paxton bill and in the Slayton bill, there is a provision that says that the physician has to certify in order to have, and the only exception in immediate jeopardy, such like an pregnancy. It does provide the criminalization as to the physician if he doesn't do that, or if an abortion, whether it is an abortion or a chemically induced abortion, that is the life of the mother is not in jeopardy. That's where the criminal act comes in. But it also provides that a lot of times women have said, and I've had people tell me this before. Specifically a friend of mine whose daughter got pregnant. She said, well, she's going to kill herself if she doesn't get an abortion. Under those two statutory provisions, that is not the life of the mother in serious jeopardy. It has to be something like an ectopic pregnancy. So, Steve, honestly, I don't know what bill you're talking about, but I am totally unaware of any present bill that's before the legislature that says we're going to go after the women.
Ms. Gluck?
I'm gonna.
Okay. Mr. Norred, recognize.
Thank you. The bills that have been proposed don't say we're going to go after the women. What they say are things like we're going to treat the unborn like we treat everybody else. The problem with that understanding is that we don't treat anybody alike. And that's why I have some language in here that talked about toward the bottom. And again, this is one revision back. This is the almost right one. And I just said, yeah, I'm sorry. But we often treat people differently, both victims and perpetrators, based on particular conditions. If you shoot a member of the judiciary, you get enhanced punishment. If you shoot a firefighter or a cop, bad things happen. If you negligently end somebody's life, then you get treated differently. We treat a lot of people differently. There's not one standard that people get, everybody gets after birth, that no pre-birth child gets. So one of the problems that we have in the party is that we're not used to being the winners on this, but we've been for some time. And we want to continue to pretend that we're back when the bad guys were setting the agenda. It used to be easy to make fun of the pro-choicers because they wanted partial birth abortion. So their lunatics were running the asylum. now we're to the point where our lunatics can run the asylum. We can have people that call themselves Republicans that say, yes, I want 14-year-old girls getting the injection because they had an abortion. And that's consistent with a version of our theory. And that's messed up. So we have to be the grown-ups now. We have to govern. We have to recognize that we've never, ever prosecuted women for abortion in this state, at least not as a general rule. We've always gone after the abortion providers. Pre-Roe versus Wade, we put people in jail up to 5 years for being an abortion provider. Now, how many Republicans knew that in this room before today? I would suspect not very many. But we don't know our own history, so we go around talking about abortion as murder. Well, yes, but it's not the same. It's not the same. And we often don't, and it's not pro-choice to admit that. It's not. We can be hard on abortion. We can recognize, but we can recognize that people struggle with real-world issues, and it's hard, and they have to deal with hard things. And we shouldn't forget that when we're talking about these things. So all this is doing is saying that we recognize that we are totally full-formed, without reservation against abortion. At this time, we're not interested in giving language to people who want to misconstrue our position and say that we want to put young females in electric chairs because they are going through a hard time and they make a mistake. So, and that's what all this does. It's simply saying we are pro-life, and we're not chasing after, we're not sending cops to go find teenage girls and put them in prison. That's what this is designed to do. And it's also designed, I think, for us to start thinking about these things in different ways and talking about them in different ways. We have to be able to say to people that we are not interested in putting people in jail for murder because they had an abortion. I understand the allure of using abortion as murder. I understand that. It's an alluring slogan. But we're the governing body now, and we have to grow. We have to be better than allowing people to use that language, which is easy to use, against us, get votes from the other side because they're petrified what's going to happen to their teenage daughter who makes a mistake, irrespective of how we feel about that. Anyway, that's the defense.
Ms. Glover, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. I am opposed to this resolution, and my opposition is very nuanced. For our abolish abortion priority, our language contains information or contains language that this is opposing. So where it says recent proposed legislation includes verbiage that can be construed to assert that women might be prosecuted for murder and sentenced to death. We have verbiage that talks about criminalization, but I think that is really important. Abortion, we know now scientifically, we know it's murder in the womb. And we've got to make a cultural change to educate people exactly what it is, the dire consequences of having sex outside of marriage. We have absolutely no intent to prosecute young girls and put them in electric chairs or in jail or anything else. But I do think it's important to talk about abortion in terms of criminalization for those providers. And so I don't want to do anything that removes the seriousness of our bills or tweaks that language at the same time as Warren asserted, there have never been any young girls who have been put in jail or in the electric chair for getting an abortion, and I don't see that ever happening, a judge ever doing that. We do want to hold those providers responsible, and that's the intent of the bills that we have passed. But I'm against this just from a nuanced place that I think we need to be honest about what it really is.
Mr. Apley.
H. Scott Apley, SD 11, speaking against the resolution. Abortion is murder, right? And the number one person who can facilitate the happening of that murder is the mother. The second being the doctor. I'm completely fine with the bill that comes out and criminalizes the doctor, but we have to acknowledge we have to acknowledge the role that the mother plays in facilitating this murder. So we always say that abortion is murder, and we hammer that drum, but then sometimes I think we act in a way that we don't necessarily believe that in all circumstances. Our principles, we added equal protection. The main thing is equal protection, right? Is that an unborn baby conceived in the womb has the same right to justice as anybody else does for crimes committed against them. And if we believe that murder is a crime we do, and we believe that abortion is murder, then there has been a crime committed, and the person responsible for that crime should be held accountable. Now, that does not mean that there isn't room in our hearts for compassion and understanding of people's circumstances. Everybody has a litany of things that they faced in their lives that have resulted in decisions that they have had to accept the consequences for. We don't lose compassion over that. We acknowledge that, but at the same time, I think that the principle here is that this is murder. And another thing is that we have Republican House members right now who have bills who this resolution could very well undermine. It could undermine the efforts of our legislative priority committee. So I don't think either morally or practically this is the right course for us to take. That's all.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Wiley?
I have a point of order. We spoke today about addressing it, and 2 years ago, following the legislative session in which our legislative priorities were not addressed, motion was brought before, a resolution was brought before the floor calling for the governor to call for a special session to address our legislative priorities. At that time, the point was made that resolution was out of order because it was a resolution by this body to address a legislative authority, and in our laws, it states the Legislative Priorities Committee is the body that will address our priorities. At that point, the chair ruled that it was out of order in favor of the legislative priority, the committee being the only ones who can address legislative priority issues. I would like to ask the question, is this in order? Does the body have the ability to make this decision?
I think he's a little gun shy right now.
Go ahead and give us the end.
Stand at ease. The ruling of the parliamentarian is that it is in order because it does not specifically address a legislative priority, just the same as we have already considered some resolutions today that were outside of the resolutions committee, and it did not interfere with their business or overstep their purview. So this is not exactly dealing with the legislative priority. It is an issue that we're looking at clarifying our position on. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, I'm speaking against the resolution. We took this up in the resolutions committee yesterday, and there was a lot of back and forth about it, and we did not vote it out, and there were a lot of good reasons for that. As a previous speaker said, I want to bring up one of our principles from our Heart State Party platform. The sanctity of innocent human life, created in the image of God, which should be equally protected from fertilization to natural death. Please be aware that at the last convention, that principle was altered and one word was added, equally. Equally protected, okay? So I believe this resolution does violate our principles. I will also say that I have been on this platform committee at the last 3 state conventions and on the subcommittee which drafts our pro-life planks. And we hear from a lot of people came to testify from the Abolish Abortion movement who support equal protection. And they are not, as a previous speaker said, lunatics, okay? These are passionate people opposed to abortion who believe that babies in the womb deserve the equal protection of the law. Now, whether that means what the consequences would be, that is something that would be hashed out when the statutes are being written, okay? A previous speaker, just ad nauseum, keeps talking about putting teenage girls in an electric chair. Well, first of all, we don't have an electric chair in Texas. It's overly graphic language. And it's doubtful that even if that were the law, that any jury would pass that sentence. But all of the issues that the previous speaker raised, those are things, good points, that should be taken into consideration when a law is being crafted. Once we are at the point of banning abortion and we're actually writing a statute and this is going through the legislature, then all of those things could be considered. But to say right off the bat that we will not offer equal protection as a principle to babies inside the womb, we need to affirm the principle of equal protection, and then when the statute is written, we can allow for some leeway and understanding, okay? The other point that needs to be raised is that this only divides the pro-life movement. As I said, there is a very vocal, I don't think they're a majority, but there is a very vocal group of people in the anti-abortion movement who support equal protection, okay? There is no reason for us to take a position to divide the pro-life movement at this time. Again, this is not to say that any of the points about the wisdom of certain penalties aren't valid. Those are all valid, and those can be just taken up later. But to in this very public way, to divide the pro-life movement, in my view, would be a huge mistake. And finally, as I said yesterday, the issue of criminalizing women was used as an excuse to kill the abolition of abortion bill in the last session. In the last session, Jeff Leach killed it in his committee, using that as an excuse, okay? Now, the committee was perfectly free to revise the bill and pass out the abolition bill with no criminal penalties for the women. But he used that as an excuse. I guarantee you, Republicans in the legislature who do not want to pass an abolition bill, they will take this and say, well, the RPT opposes this bill, so we have to kill it, okay? Let's not give them cover for that. Again, this is not the time to be drafting criminal statutes. The time for that is later. The time right now is to take a principled stand for equal protection and a principled stand to unite the pro-life movement and not divide it.
Here, here. Mr. Brooks? Here, here. Good job, Orlando.
Today's top story, Texas Republicans criminalize women for abortions. I think we can all imagine what the media will make of that. I am never in favor of extreme things. I'm never in favor of extreme measures. Everybody in this room hates abortion. We are disgusted by abortion. But are we going to actually tell our district attorneys to prosecute women for committing the horrible act? We understand why they do it. And no, they're not all victims. I think we also understand that. I spent 13 years as a Texas prosecutor. I look around this room and I see the ultimate jurors. I mean, I would have loved to have had y'all on my panel. I could have gotten y'all to convict for lots of things, I promise you. But I bet you I couldn't get y'all to unanimously agree on this issue. If I couldn't even get y'all to do that, could a prosecutor in Texas get a jury of average Joes and Janes to convict on this issue? I'm going to ask you to, let's not send the message that we're going to attack women. Let's continue what we're doing. Let's teach. Let's let women hear the heartbeats before they make those decisions. Let them understand what they're doing. Let's educate. Do not criminalize women for this horrible choice. It's a mistake. It's going to take us down a horrible, horrible path. Thank you.
Ms. Jones, you're recognized.
Grace Jones, SD20. I'm speaking against this. First of all, I do believe that an issue like this should go before the delegates of this state. It's a hot button issue. There are a lot of passionate feelings and emotions on either side, and it's not really fair to them for us to make this call. I also don't really care what the media says. We are not voting on a resolution to criminalize abortion. We are voting on a resolution to say that we as a body oppose it. And we don't, because I oppose this resolution. Now, let me just ask you, a 15-year-old boy is hungry. His family doesn't have a lot of money. Maybe he's neglected by his parents. He goes out and he steals. Now, are we going to decriminalize theft? Or are we going to leave that up to a judge and a jury to consider the circumstances? Also, what's the typical argument against abolishing abortion? What's the number one thing that you hear? What about rape and incest? Okay, that's the exception, not the rule. We are making a blanket judgment here on exceptions. Yes, there are young women that are pressured into abortions. Yes, that can be taken into account. However, how many of you have seen the stories of women celebrating, their 15th abortion? They're rejoicing over murdering their child. This child is a human, or this child is not a human. Make your choice. Let me also say this. Let me give you another example. A young woman, let's say she's 17, she doesn't have any money, she's a single mother, she has a child, she has a 2-month-old. She lives with her mother hates that child. She goes out and asks someone to murder her 2-month-old. How should we proceed? Is that 2-month-old more or less valuable than a child in the womb? Please think through how you are labeling this. It is important, and when we say murder, we mean murder. And if you make something against the law, yet you remove the penalty, tell me why that law exists. Thank you.
Ms. Narvaez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Naomi Narvaez, SC21. This resolution did not pass out of committee yesterday for a reason, and mostly stated by Roland and Grace. But I want to make sure that we understand that this is very, very critical for our party. If we move from our principle of pro-life in any way and divide it, it's really going to hurt us. I've counted 5 times just right now, and I'm sure there's more, where God in His Word says, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in His own image. Whoever that's Genesis. Leviticus, whoever takes a human life shall surely be put to death. Exodus, you shall not murder. Exodus, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall he be put to death. The whole idea here is that we also want to pass constitutional carry. And we've said before, the reason that a gun society is a free society or polite society is because we know what's going to happen when someone points a gun at us. We know that's it for us if we get that gun pointed at us. It's the same here. We need to value life. And there's no reason for us to pass a resolution that will not deter. The reason that there is this law, and the reason that God put this, is because we need to deter from crime. And this almost says you can go ahead and do it. And so I oppose this. I ask my colleagues to oppose it and vote no on this. And please make sure that we remain the party of pro-life. And lastly, I couldn't care less what Democrats or the media say. I'm not going to move an inch from being pro-life.
Mr. Blankenship, you're recognized.
I'm Chuck Blankenship. I'm from Senate District 1. I'm a physician, the medical director for the First Choice Pregnancy Center in Texarkana. I look at pregnancy from the very moment of conception, and there's some excellent scientific evidence that shows that life begins at conception, and you develop as a human well after you go through puberty. So I am very much in favor of abolishing abortion. One thing we seem to forget is that there are two people involved in making the choice to engage in an act that may end up with a human life. And until we involve the male counterpart in this, I'm not going to support any resolutions until you put them in.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, you probably think you know what I'm going to say, but no. I'd like to move to postpone this and refer it back to committee.
Second.
There's a motion, and it has been seconded, to move this issue, this resolution, back into the Resolutions Committee. Would you like to discuss your motion?
Yes, sir. I think I got the votes already. I don't need to speak. It's a political issue. I agree that abortion is murder. But I also agree that there are political ramifications for the Republican Party of Texas if we pass this now. I don't think this resolution is there yet. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think this wording is correct yet. It needs to be massaged a little bit more. And I want the committee to spend just a little bit more time working on this before we put it to the... I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, but I also don't want to take heat from a hostile media. I don't want to give the Democrats any more ammunition. They got plenty of ammunition already. So let's kick it back to committee. Let them work on it a little bit more, and we'll talk about it next time.
Sidebars. Mr. Brooks?
I've been working on this pretty hard, but I concur. I think we need to table this, let the committee deal with it some more. And I think we need to go ahead and not make a decision on this right now. I agree.
Point of information? Point of information? Are we postponing this or are we referring it back to committee?
The motion is to refer it back to the Resolutions Committee. Is there any further discussion?
I did say postpone.
The right language is to refer. Okay. There is a motion that has been seconded to take this resolution and refer it back to the Resolutions Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. Any further new business? If there is no further new business, we'll move to announcements. First announcement, I would like to introduce to the body, three of our regional field directors, Troy Jackson from the North Region. Region. And Elaine Heckman for our coastal region. Also, Rhonda Lacey of the Strike Force. If you want to support some of the municipal elections that will be happening, remember, early voting starts on April the 19th. The actual municipal elections will occur on May the 1st. See Rhonda Lacey to coordinate support of the Strike Force teams for municipal level elections. This evening, the Republican Party of Texas will be hosting South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem for a fundraising event in Frisco, Texas. Thing is the dates for the next SREC meeting are 4th through the 5th of June. Question I put before the body, East Texas or West Texas?
West Texas! East Texas! West! East Texas! West Texas!
All those in favor of East Texas signify by saying yay. Yay! All those in West Texas signify by saying yay. Yay! We will do it by a standing vote. All those in favor of the next SREC meeting being in East Texas, please stand. Please rise. may be seated. All those in favor of West Texas, please stand. Using your math, it does appear that the next SREC meeting from the 4th through the 5th June will be in East Texas. We will get that notification. I know that you deal only in nautical miles. We'll talk. Mr. Bill Young is here. Bill, where are you? Mr. Bill Young will be, he'll be able to meet you at the site. Brandon, do you have directions you want to put out?
Hey guys, okay, so Mr. Young left some maps on there, that they're on the registration table. If you need one, take a look at it, take it with you, take a picture of the street. That's Bill's cell phone number. If you have any questions or you have any problems getting there, give him a call. Pay attention to the map and make sure, because you are going to I believe it's the World Trade Bridge, and he says on there, don't go to Mexico. So pay attention to the map. Also, once we adjourn, if you will please take your personal items and clear as quickly as you can. Staff is pulling up everything so we can clear the room. There's a wedding coming in tonight and they're waiting to set up. Thank you.
There being no further business to come before the body at this time, if there is no objection, and Jill has the postcards, if there be no objection, the meeting is adjourned.